having many near-death experiences. I was always hovering there between life and death. I have avoided this for long enough. A couple of people have asked in my comment section for a very long time. Thank you for your patience. You've asked me for my story. Where do you come from, Kerry? Why do you know what you know? And how do you know what you know? I want to share that with you today. And I want to share with you that it is true that behind exceptional information and teachings, there are exceptional circumstances. That's the truth. But I also want to share with you today that this isn't just my story. This is your story too, because you, just like me, look in the mirror and see just an ordinary, average, everyday human being. That's what you see. But the truth is, you're not ordinary, you never can be, you never will be. You're magical. But you've lost connection with that magnificence. I didn't always have my connection in place, and that's part of the story that I'm going to share with you today. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to leave out big chunks because it's kind of hard to remember everything and put it all together. It's invariable that after a video I press stop and then I go, oh, should have said this, should have said that. So yeah, forgive me if I miss out big chunks. I'll do my best. I remember being born. Wow. Okay, I just said to you I might forget big chunks of information. Well, as I'm editing, I realize a massive chunk of information, in fact, a defining moment of my life, I left out of this whole story. So I'm editing to insert this very important piece of my story, and that is when I was 13, I had a vision. A vision that really helped me to define the path that I walk upon today. I was 13 years old. It was my birthday, in fact. I was walking to school because high school started, the very first day of high school started on my 13th birthday. But prior to my 13th birthday, I was very conflicted. I had the choice of following my mom's religion of Judaism or my dad's religion of Christianity. And I didn't want to make the wrong choice, and I was plagued by which was the right one to make. And on my 13th birthday, as I'm walking to school, I look up and all of the clouds in the sky gather to one point. Nothing in me told me that this was mystical. It didn't stand out as a mystical experience at that time. Looking back, I was already, from when I left the house, in an altered state of consciousness. I'm walking, not really a hill, just a little incline actually. I look up, the clouds start to converge. And they converge into the shape of a cross. So all the clouds become the symbol of Christianity. And I go, oh yeah, I'm getting the answer. God is speaking to me and telling me that Christianity is the way. That's the right choice to make. And the clouds converge even further, and the figure of Christ on the cross becomes apparent. And this figure of Christ walks off of the cross and comes directly to me to stand in front of me. Time had stopped by this stage. And what could have been a minute, a second, or many years worth of conversation, I don't know. This occurred in this vision as Christ spoke to me and told me that neither religion was right, that this was not about Christianity or Judaism. His words were something that I misunderstood and never could make sense of until many years later, because among many other things, he said to me, "You are as I am." And the gist of it is, he was telling me that I was the same as him, and that I was on earth to do the same thing that he did. I didn't realize that that applied to all of us, that we are all here to light up our Christ consciousness in the very non-religious sense. And the alignment that I'm speaking of is that alignment directly home to God, source, consciousness. It is an alignment of love, of compassion, of forgiveness, of connection to the pure source truth from whence we come. That message made me know with absolute clarity that my path was a path of spirituality. I didn't know what that was going to look like, because I knew that my path was before me, and that it was a path of Christ consciousness, even if I didn't understand what that meant. And I didn't understand. I left school and I used my psychic gifts. I began doing readings for people. I tried all sorts of means to connect with people energetically. Didn't really come together for me until I became aware that my life held a purpose of bringing Christ consciousness back into embodiment, so that we can all do it, so that we can all return to the truth of who we are. Okay, that was my big chunk of information that I've just inserted. Whew, I feel happier now having given this to you. Carry on with the video. I remember being born, but I do more than remember being born. I remember prior to this incarnation coming into the human body, and it felt like a spiraling, like literally a downward spiral. And the closer I came into embodiment and into the density of the body, the more I could feel myself separating from my true form, and I could feel a panic, an extreme cold, icy panic sink in as I realized I couldn't backtrack, and I realized I couldn't get out of the incarnation that I had agreed to. Everything seemed so much easier from the vantage point of my higher consciousness. But as I began to separate from that higher consciousness, the true enormity of what I had undertaken sank in. I'm going to share it at the end of today's conversation. I'm going to share with you how this relates to you, because it does. We all did this, you see. We all, at some point, chose to come into this human embodiment for a variety of reasons. Some, to play in this field of forgetfulness, to see who you are, to see if you could remember. Others of you came in to help remind those who'd gotten stuck. And some, like myself, thought there was this maverick idea, this crazy, insane idea, that if we came into this embodiment from a future time and a future place, we could inject into this incarnation, into the present time, we could inject higher consciousness in here, thus elevating the consciousness for humanity. There's a strong possibility that you're a part of that crew, part of that team, because it's not me. There are millions of us on the planet at this time doing this thing. Remember, I said this might be my story, but it's our story too. It's our story of insanity. What were we thinking? What were we thinking that we believed that we could come into this insanity, this forgetfulness, this chaos, and remember our harmony, remember our vibratory essence, our vibratory frequency, whilst in the amnesia and in the forgetfulness of the human form. So that's what I felt. Circling the drain pipe is the kind of feeling that I got as I circled down into this embodiment. My mom later told me the story about how many times she nearly lost the pregnancy, and the lengths that she had to go to stitch me into place, to keep me in her womb. I clearly wanted to come away. Those were my mom's words. She said, Kerry, you kept wanting to come away. And boy, I felt a grief. I actually felt a huge sorrow when she told me that story. But I'm skipping ahead. I was born ill. I was born sick, and I didn't know how much that was going to shape my life, how perfect that plan was, how difficult, but how perfect at the same time. Being very sick, I was in hospital a lot of the time, and pretty much from my early childhood till around about my teenage years, I spent more days in hospital every year than I did at home. So you can understand that if that's your normal, that being at home is a bit of a novel experience, and being normal doesn't really happen, and always feeling out and not part. At school, I was the stranger in the class. Who was she? Because Kerry was hard, so nobody knew me because I was hardly ever there. Hospital, where I spent much of my childhood, was a crazy, insane experience, because so much happened in hospital that was for many years very cloudy and very strange. I remember having lots and lots of what I thought were dreams of interactions with galactic beings. And by the way, I had these dreams at home and in hospital. They just seemed to happen more when I was in that in-between life and death place where I spent a lot of my childhood. Spent a lot of my childhood gasping for air. I spent a lot of my childhood not being able to breathe appropriately. And in those days, there wasn't great medication for asthmatics. It was pretty much cortisone and get on with it. So nowadays, asthma is much easier to control. But back then, it was very much a life and death situation. I look at my kids today. My kids have got asthma. It's not a big deal, nothing terribly serious about it. But in my day, and the severity of asthma I had, I was permanently on the brink of having collapsed lungs. So this was keeping me alive was quite the full-time job, and that was my mom's undertaking. My mom became incredibly, as you can understand, incredibly afraid of me dying. So when I was home, it was a case of almost wanting to keep me in cotton wool kind of thing. Don't go outside, don't go jumping, don't go playing, don't go laughing, don't go running around. So everything led me into me. Everything led me into the center of my own being. And being sick and in hospital, a lot of the time I was too busy breathing and too busy gasping for the next breath and too busy working for the next breath to speak. So I spent a lot of time in silence. I became very comfortable in silence. That noise and outward conversation became almost too loud. And still today, I much prefer silence. There's hardly ever any noise. And I got 3 children. And it's not that they're shushed. It's just that they've grown up in this environment and they find silence very comforting for themselves. Man, when they scream, I got to tell you though, my daughter's got a pair of lungs on her. So when she screams, we know all about it. So it's not total silence, but it's more silent than most households. My husband, thankfully, is as comfortable in silence and craves silence as much as I do. It took me though, that sick childhood took me into another world. Kind of like having many near-death experiences. I was always hovering there between life and death. And in that in-between place, I didn't know it at the time, but I was leaving the false matrix and coming back and leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back to the point that I got resentful when I got taken to the hospital. I got resentful because I didn't want to get better. I got resentful because I just wanted to die because it was so much more beautiful on the other side that every time I got brought back into embodiment, it hurt. Breathing was difficult. Nothing was easy. My mom and dad's marriage was falling apart. When I was home, there was continual shouting. My dad was an alcoholic. My brother was a bully. My mom was always afraid of me dying. It wasn't a harmonious place to be. I was surrounded by love though. You know, don't get me wrong. I don't want to say to you that I had the worst childhood. It was just a very interesting childhood. But there was most certainly love. There was absolutely love. In fact, it's through my mom and her capacity for empathy and her capacity for love that I can love in the way that I do and that I can access emotional depth in the way that I do. It took me many, many, many years from hospital, in fact, pretty much most of my adult life, to do this one important thing with all of the information that I was being given outside the matrix. Think about it. I was permanently traveling into what I would call the divine matrix, which is the natural world, God's world, created by pure God source consciousness. And if that sounds odd to you, then watch the video that I made in my Cosmic Origin series called Who is God? There was this continual connection to the God world, to life as it's meant to be. You know, when people say that, I'm sure you've said it, it's not meant to be this way. Don't you look at the world and say, but this isn't right, huh? I mean, well, look at people, the way they treat each other, the way they speak to each other, the way they behave, the way they carry on, the fighting, the chaos, the name calling. I don't need to tell you, this is not normal. It is not meant to be this way. But then when you get to go to that place where you make sense and life makes sense, and it's a terrible word to use, but it feels normal, as in it feels harmonious, and you can be there and relate to being there. Continually being plugged into that place, I was getting so much information from outside of the prison that the matrix, the false matrix is. I was getting so much information, so many lessons, so much interaction with galactic beings being beings of higher consciousness, 5D and beyond, from some of them this planet, most of them other planets, but they were councils of teachers that taught me, connected with me, who I entrusted to be my friends and my guides because of one reason. Not because they told me, hey, Kerry, I know the truth and I'm going to teach you everything. No, because they told me what I tell you. See, they were my teachers so that I could teach you. And that is, you're not here to learn from us. You're here to learn from you. You're not here for us to give you the answers. You're here for us to lead you to you who will give you the answers. So that was my, for want of a better word, training in my early years. But it took me years and years and years and years to integrate what I'd gotten. This is why I always tell people, my Plasma Light Tribe, you guys know this, integration is everything. Integration is connection, is presence, is stillness, is where the mystery and the magic and the divinity actually happens. It is not what you know. I wish I could just let people know this one thing about spirituality, that whether you understand it or not is irrelevant, because what you know doesn't matter. It's what you can integrate or embody or connect with and to. It's how you relate to yourself and to life from the inside. That is what spirituality is. An integration of spirituality is everything. Knowing the answers will never make you enlightened. Integrating and applying the answers, okay, that's a different story. And that was my life's work. My life's work was, okay, now you've got this information, Kerry, now you need to integrate it. So I was absolutely given the space in childhood to begin the integration, but this was lifetimes worth of teachings that I was given in my childhood. So obviously it was going to take me many years to come into full integration with it. In my childhood, stands out to me as my favorite memory of childhood. My mom suffered from very intense migraines, to the point that she couldn't have lights on. It just hurt too much. She was always wanting quiet. Again, there was my relationship with silence, always wanting quiet, never wanting bright lights. So the curtains at night were closed. Curtains were drawn, no candles, no light, maybe just a little bit of moonlight trickling in through the window. And my mom and I would sit on the couch and talk in the darkness. And it was the most comforting, beautiful place, because we would talk about love and UFOs and life and the galaxy and people and everything beyond the confines of the false matrix, because my mother was so psychic and her mother was so psychic. So I was born to that lineage specifically to give me that open, free-flowing connection with the communication that I was receiving, because my mom had access, perhaps not the level of integration, but absolutely the level of access, and she held that, she embodied that level of access to divinity. That was evident. My mom's ability to love was not of this world, and I was loved by that love. So that gave me such beautiful memories and conversations in my childhood, sitting in the lounge with my mom in a darkened room, and life just made sense in those beautiful, soft moments. I loved that. I loved that so desperately. I loved a lot about childhood. I loved sitting on my dad's knee. Do you know, my dad used to paint my fingernails. Isn't that cool? My dad was so meticulous, so beautiful, an alcoholic, absolutely, but just the most beautiful soul. I only got to really understand that after his death, but I'm going to share more of the story of my dad in another video that I want to do about twin flames, because that's actually more related to the twin flame story. But let me stay on this topic. So all of these exceptional circumstances led me to a place that you're probably familiar with, and that is not belonging, not feeling like you can connect with people, being in your own world a lot of the time. I didn't realize what a gift that was. I didn't realize how it was going to serve me and allow me to lead myself out of the existing enmeshment I had with the false matrix. And if I could lead myself out of that, I knew that I could lead others. Being in that in-between world that I described to you earlier, where I could receive information from outside of the false matrix and later on integrate it, that gave me the ability to navigate through time. And because I had the ability to, because time happens in the false matrix, that is a time prison. Outside of the false matrix, time still exists. I love it when people say time doesn't exist. No, time does exist, but it's very much more like a concept as opposed to a linear experience that it is in the timed matrix or the false matrix. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Outside of the false matrix, so in the divine matrix where truth is, you know, and I want to explain to you why you know so much more. It's instantaneous. You're totally telepathic in the divine matrix, because when you're in the divine matrix, you are no longer plugged into the lie, no longer plugged into the illusion, no longer answerable to the illusion, no longer serving the illusion, no longer co-creating the illusion. You are then in a different world. And in that different world, because there is no lie within you, answers are so obvious and apparent, and you understand things without anybody needing to explain them to you. That's why a lot of you say, I don't know how I know this, but I know this, because you've spent time there too in your dream states. Maybe just not having had the opportunities for integration. That's why the Deep Relaxation series on my website is so important. In the online shop, Deep Relaxation Trilogy, it's in the discount section. I know I've told you guys about this before, but it's such a beautiful way to pave the path to that space of integration, which is embodiment, which is everything. In my childhood, because I could navigate beyond time, because I understood what time was, that a second outside of the false matrix was still 1 second, but into that 1 second, an immense amount of information, which is photonic light, could be injected into that 1 second, thus enabling enlightenment to occur in 1 second in the divine matrix. So when people say to you, oh, it's impossible, human beings aren't going to evolve in time, they're not going to get it, that's because you're in the time matrix. And from the perspective of time as you know it, no, it's going to take hundreds, thousands of years for humanity to still evolve and develop. However, what must be taken into account is that people can experience 1 second outside of the false matrix, and into that 1 second receive a download of higher consciousness. The trick is going to be to integrate it, of course. That's going to be the real level of mastery. Point being, it's possible. So in that divine matrix, there is so much that you instantaneously know because of the alignment that you plug into in that divine matrix. I was bullied. I said to you my brother was a bully, but that was only half of the bullying. At school, I was mercilessly bullied. So sick some of the time, at school some of the time, bullied whenever I was at school. It was kind of like being caught between, what's that expression about being caught between the fire and the frying pan, right? Something like that it didn't really matter where I was. There was discomfort all around me. All of that brought me into myself, but it did teach me to be invisible. It did teach me to be silent. It's one of the things that I've really had to work so hard on in this life. So hard. Don't be invisible. Don't be silent. Woo. Massive lesson. Because silence became the safe place, right? Avoiding the limelight became exactly where I gravitated to. Behind the scenes, that's where I wanted to be. It's not where my life led me, but that was my comfort zone. That was my comfortable place. I've really got to work to be on camera with you. I've really got to work to speak into your heart in a way that makes me visible to you. And remember, I said to you, I'm sharing this with you because it's your story too. And for you to access your memories of home, your memories of the truth of who you are, requires that same integration, which is coming out of the noise of the brain. Stop trying to fill up the brain. Stop trying to get analytical, logical, linear answers. Get into the unknown. Presence, silence, stillness, and immerse yourself there. And in that moment, in that exact moment, you've left the confines, the prison, so to speak, of the false matrix, and brought yourself into the freedom of the divine matrix. That transition from the false matrix to the divine matrix, it is not a place that you go to outside of where you are now. It's not even another body. It's your existing body in your existing room, in your existing environment. But it is your field of consciousness that allows you to gravitate to the false matrix or the true matrix. In the online community that I meet with every single week, if you want to grow even deeper, even further, from my heart to yours, let's do this thing. We came here to liberate the planet, right? We're in the process of doing exactly that, body by body, person by person, soul by soul.